Hello creative people, welcome back to my channel. This is Everly Green. I am a Spanish illustrator, and at the beginning of my creative journey, one of the things I really struggled with was adding texture to my illustrations so they wouldn't look flat and boring. So if that is something that you're also struggling with, I've got you covered, because today I will be telling you how I use textures to give some extra depth and dimension to my illustrations. Let's dive into it. When it comes to adding texture to my illustrations, I really like to use two different techniques. I like to use a texture paper so that my illustration looks like it's been done in a more traditional way, and I like to use different texture brushes. I start adding texture to my illustration as soon as I finish drawing my sketch. So the first thing I always do before plugging in any colors is to add my paper texture. In order to do that, I am going to tap on Actions, which is the little wrench icon on the top left corner of the screen. Then I am going to tap on Add, and then I'll select Insert a Photo. I'm going to select my favorite paper texture, which is the texture I always use for all my illustrations. If you're not sure where to find a nice paper texture, a simple Google search would do. Just take a screen capture of the paper whose texture you like the most. Once the paper image has been inserted as a new layer, I will resize it so I can cover the whole canvas. Now I'm going to go to my Layers panel, and after renaming the layer, I will set it to multiply and lower its opacity a bit so it won't look too harsh. I personally like to set the opacity of my paper layer at around 50%. It is very important that you keep this paper texture layer as the topmost layer in your layers panel, because that way whatever you want to paint underneath will be affected by it. If you paint on a layer above it, the multiply effect will not affect the layer you are painting. See? If we create a layer underneath, it looks like you are painting on a piece of paper, but the exact same layer looks different if we move it to the top of our layers panel. So remember, the paper effect will always be your topmost layer. The second way I add extra texture to my illustrations is through texture brushes. I always use my custom brush set because it's the one I developed that fits my illustrating needs. The Procreate has got a lot of good default texture brushes that you can try out. When I am shading my illustrations, I like to add texture little by little and layer by layer. I usually open a layer, clip it down and set it to multiply. Then I choose the brush I'm going to use, and the brush I'm using really depends a lot on the bit of the illustration I am shading. For example, when I am focusing on a character's skin, I would use my smooth shades and my denim brushes. And because they are pressure sensitive, I always make sure I work with them at a low opacity so that creating depth and textures can be done nicely and smoothly. When it comes to working on clothes like this furry jumper, I like to use my smooth shades brush and then add a bit of extra texture with the Pretty Grass brush, the Furry Friends brush, or even my denim brush again. For the hair, however, I like using my hair detail brush. One of the keys to making texture brushes stand out is using blending effects. As I mentioned before, I like working using several layers set to multiply, but I also like using layers set to screen mode, because it adds a nice contrast that really makes the texture of the brushes pop. See the difference? This is only the base color with a multiply layer on top, and as you can see, the multiply layer darkens the color of the layer below it, but as soon as we add the screen layer, which brightens the color of the layer below, it looks much better. I really like using both the paper texture and the texture brushes for every element of my illustrations, and I truly believe that both techniques can elevate any illustration a lot. Have you ever tried using paper layers before? Or are there any other techniques that you like using to add texture to your drawings? Let me know down there in the comments so we can all learn together. And if you found this video useful, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more artsy videos. You can also follow my journey as an illustrator on Instagram at @everlygreenart, where I post all my illustrations, including this one over here. Thank you so much for watching, have a lovely day and see you in the next video. Bye!